agriculture is uniform management, and this ignores spatial and temporal variability, and it leads to the overuse of farm inputs and sort of destroys the environment. Uniform management could be based on the average condition in the field, but most people actually base their uniform management on the best field conditions. So that means they're trying to fertilize or irrigate for the places in the field that have the highest yield. And that leads to really serious overuse of resources. Precision agriculture is high tech, and it involves all the technology you see here. A lot of the current interest is on deep learning algorithms, big data, uh, robots, and drones. But there's a lot of other technology that historically has been important. Um, Remote sensing is one of the major thrusts in precision agriculture. You can use it to measure soil properties, or you can look at the crop and identify stresses on the crop, or you can use thermal emission of energy to measure the temperature of the soil of the crop and indicate when the crop has water stress. And here's a simple diagram showing the absorption spectrum for electromagnetic energy. And you can see as you go through the visible spectrum, there are certain pigments in plants like chlorophyll B that absorb light in the blue wavelengths and in the red wavelengths. And there's other pigments like chlorophyll A that do somewhat the same type of thing, but slightly different wavelengths. And less common are other pigments like carotene and phycoerythrin, phycocyanin, which distinguish between the wavelengths that tell you information about crop biomass or crop nitrogen or aphids or any other type of stress. And let me talk about aphids as an example. Um, this is an invasive species and it causes huge yield losses in soybeans across the entire Midwestern region. Um, Remote sensing is a good alternative to crop scouting, where you know technical service providers walk through a field using a zigzag pattern, and they try to find out whether or not there are aphid infestations. Obviously, they're missing some areas of the field, and they're not assessing um, the entire field in a very efficient way. And this is important because outbreaks of aphids occur in isolated places and then spread. And the second thing is that not only is the location of the outbreak important, but also what's the population of aphids. You don't want to spray until there's a chance of having economic damage. And that generally happens when you get 250 aphids per plant or more. So with remote sensing, we can look at the entire field. We can see where the infestations start early, and then we can spray those locations. So here's some of our research on this topic with Robert Cook. And we've used drones to look at the absorption spectra or the reflectance spectrum of soybean plants that have aphids. And if their populations are below the threshold, you get higher reflectance, especially in the near infrared and the red wavelengths. And if you have high populations, then the reflectance goes down. So we've used this sort of technology with machine learning to separate areas of the field that are above or below the threshold of 250 aphids per plant. And the specific technique we're using is called support vector machines, which classifies the field into two areas separated by this boundary. And so you can classify based on your remote sensing which of these two domains the plant is in and estimate the area that's going to be needing spray and then go out and do that spraying. Another topic we work on is nitrogen. Nitrogen fertilizer is essential for crops, and applying too much leads to environmental pollution of groundwater like the Ogallala Aquifer, for example. So the idea here is to use remote sensing to identify which plants have nitrogen stress and how much stress exists. So we can apply a small amount of fertilizer when we plant the crop and then use remote sensing during the growing season to assess when and where nitrogen deficiency develops, and then apply a side dress variable application depending on the location. And we use the remote sensing to determine where and when the in-season variable rate N fertilizer is needed. And we can also assess the impacts on yield and nitrogen pollution of the environment. So the way we do this research generally is, we'll apply different rates to different areas, and we can construct a yield response curve. So we measure the yield in each of these plots as a function of fertilizer rate applied. So 0 is a control, 300 kilograms per hectare of nitrogen would be a sufficient area. And if you look at the background, you can see that when you have these higher rates, the crop looks greener. When you have lower rates, the crop is yellow, indicating it's under stress. So we take those data for different rates of nitrogen, which are here on the x-axis, and we do the remote sensing. We calculate what we call a normalized difference vegetative index, which is a combination of the reflectance in the red and the near infrared wavelengths. And so the higher the NDVI, the greener the crop, the higher the yield, the less the stress to nitrogen. And by looking at this, the shape of this curve, we know that the optimal rate, where you don't get any extra economic value from applying more fertilizer, is 112 pounds per acre. So then if we have another spot in the field that we sense with remote sensing, and it has an NDVI of 0.7, as opposed to an NDVI of about 0.78, we know that it's deficient. And the difference in the x-axis values between those two NDVIs is the amount of nitrogen we need to add. So we can then go in and apply those different rates to the field. And in this particular case, we also have drain tiles at the outlet of each of these subsections, which measure the nitrogen that's coming through the soil and going out into the environment. So we take the map, put it in a computer, and then drive a tractor through the field, spread the different rates of fertilizer according to where they're needed and when they're needed. And so here's some of our results. If you use this technique, and the green rows are the fields that receive variable rate nitrogen. The blank rows are the rows that received uniform rate of nitrogen. You see there's no difference in yield. Okay, so all the yields were optimum, but we applied 20 to 30% less nitrogen using variable rate nitrogen. Now you might add, well, why don't we just apply no nitrogen? Well, here's what happens if you don't apply nitrogen. The crop really suffers. So the crop responds carefully or closely to nitrogen. We need to figure out exactly what's the right rate and where it needs to be applied and when, and that's what precision nitrogen management is all about. I mentioned that we were measuring the loss of nitrogen through those drain fields, and across many years, we see that there's always less nitrogen coming out of the drain tiles that have variable rate nitrogen. We could have anywhere from a 20 to about a 4% reduction, depending on the weather. And on average, the reduction is about 13 or 14%. So we get good environmental benefits and we don't um, reduce the yield. Now, there's a lot of interest in robotics in precision agriculture, and this can take place either through unmanned ground vehicles like the one on the right, which we call Robot, ROWBOT. It's a robot that goes through the rows of corn and spreads fertilizer at variable rates. So this can happen even when the crop is already established. Unmanned air vehicles like drones have cameras on them, and they can take pictures on the ground and identify where this robot needs to actually apply the fertilizer. So the use of these robots in Minnesota is estimated to uh, really generate about 1,000 new jobs and bring in $150 million to our economy just in our state alone. Now, we've been using machine learning to help us identify nitrogen deficiency in corn for variable rate nitrogen. So this is different than using the spectral index of normalized difference vegetative index that I talked about earlier. We take high resolution images with about a resolution of 2 to 3 millimeters per pixel, and we can see individual leaves and the shape of the yellowing on the leaves. And it turns out that nitrogen deficiency has a V-shaped pattern for yellowing that starts at the tip of the leaves and moves down towards the stem. And that's different from any other type of deficiency, which would have a different pattern. So we take the image and we convert it to an RGB and an LAB space, which depends on intensity. We use k-means clustering and support vector machine to classify the images into the parts that are green leaves and the parts that would be yellow, that's our nitrogen deficiency, or our soil. And then we do another support vector machine model to classify the yellow leaves from the soil. We get rid of the soil. And then just like when you point your camera at someone and it puts a little yellow box around the face, we developed a method that puts a little yellow box around the leaves that have nitrogen deficiency. And that distinguishes them from the green leaves that are healthy. So here's the photograph of our image with the bounding boxes. We can count all the leaves that are deficient, and then we can develop this sort of nitrogen response curve depending on the rate applied. If you have no nitrogen, then you have a lot of leaves that have yellow. And if you have a high amount of nitrogen, then there's very few leaves that are yellow. So again, based on the actual number of leaves, you can figure out what rate of nitrogen to apply by comparing to the sufficient plants. So the difference between these two is how much nitrogen you need to apply. Another thing we're doing is we're modeling crop canopies and doing phenotyping, which estimates the traits of the plant, you know, the height of the plant, the length of the leaves, and other traits. And again, we take a camera and we put it on a drone. We fly around the plants. We collect high resolution images. We use a program called Structure from Motion to construct 3D canopies. And then we take those canopies, we segment them from the background, we skeletonize the images to extract the plants, the leaves, and the stems on individual plants. And then we measure the characteristics of each plant, stem, and leaf. So here's some pictures showing our research. The point clouds from Structure for Motion are in the upper left. Those are the whole plants. We do an iterative process where we put an artificial rain on this system. The rain moves down the leaves, and then it collects on the stem and it moves down the stem, and you get vertical lines showing the path of movement of the artificial rain. Those vertical lines are the stems. And so eventually we can take out the stems from the leaves. So we have stems and leaves, and then we can begin measuring the traits of those. So we measure the leaf area index, which is the projected area of the canopy on the ground. We measure the height of the stem. We measure the length of the leaves. And so here, for example, is the different leaves and the different lengths of each leaf. We have the measurement of height as a function of growing date. We measure the distance between nodes on the stem. So the leaves, the density of leaves is dependent on how far the internodal distance is. And we measure the angle between the leaves and the stems. And all of these are important in crop breeding, where you're trying to maximize the yield of the crop by maximizing the amount of photosynthesis that the plant actually can generate. The last topic I want to talk about is precision irrigation. And we can combine precision irrigation with remote sensing to better manage our spatial and temporal patterns in soil water and crop water deficits. And there are satellites available today that can help us map the evapotranspiration or the crop water use across large areas of the world. This is available everywhere in the world now. And the technique is called mapping evapotranspiration with high resolution and internalized calibration. And here's a graph for some of our research that we conducted in Africa, showing the measured evapotranspiration on olive fields relative to the satellite-based estimate, and you can see a very strong relationship. So here's the satellite imagery. It shows individual irrigation circles. The scale on the lower right gives you the amount of evapotranspiration in millimeters or inches. So the greener values are higher than the lighter green. And you can see within fields, there's variability in water use. And you can translate this water use into a recommendation for irrigation. So this is really where we can help small farm holders with this type of technology. We can take satellite images for large areas of Texas, for example, and we can combine that with soil moisture measurements at selected areas based on knowing the soil type from databases and the crop that's planted. We can estimate whether or not the amount of ET that's happened is greater than half of the water depletion from the soil. If no, then we can go on to the next day and start over. If yes, then we have to look at the weather forecast and find out whether or not there's going to be enough rain to fill the profile back up in the soil so that the crops won't wilt. Sorry, I got these labels mixed up. Yes and no are mixed up here, but if the rain is not sufficient, then we would irrigate. If the rain is sufficient, then again, we just go on to the next day. Um, to do all this, you need good partnerships between agribusiness and extension to help deliver tools to farmers. There's lots of technology that farmers have available to them today, and there are surveys every year to see what farmers are using. A lot of them are already using satellite imagery, so that's good. Uh, the growth of drone imagery is increasing, and there's a lot of potential for the use of sensor networks that hasn't really been widely adopted. So in precision agriculture, there's been a huge number of companies formed nationwide to provide these services to growers. And in Minnesota, examples include Soltech, Farmer's Edge, Geosys, Centera, Centec, Earth Scout, Aglytics, and also large portfolios by Land O'Lakes and CHS. And all of these have large impacts on the Minnesota jobs, workforce development, and also delivery of tools to producers. So oftentimes we'll work with extension and agribusiness to sort of roll out these tools like you see here. Now, here's just one quote that indicates the kind of impact we can have. One of our collaborators with Centec says our relationship with University of Minnesota researchers and extension staff has and will continue to have a tangible impact both on technological development at Centec as well as on end user applications revolving around our products. So that's what we like to see. And just for your information, here's a kind of summary of past and future trends in precision farming. Today, about 90% of the farmers in Minnesota use auto steer to drive their tractors. It saves time and cuts down on fatigue. Also, yield mapping is widely used, so farmers know how yield varies in their field. And then grid or management zone soil sampling, about half of the farmers in Minnesota use that to better understand the spatial patterns in soil fertility. Now, the graph focuses in more on these variable rate fertilizer, herbicide, and insecticide, and you can see they're all growing quite fast, especially fertilizer, but also seeding. And we're starting to see interest in controlling insects and weeds as well. And so I think these trends are just going to continue, especially because we have the ability now to use big data analytics to help people make decisions very quickly. So with that, I will conclude my presentation. I thank you for your attention, and I will be willing to take some questions.
Well, thank you, Professor Molla, for this presentation. And I would like to open the floor for questions and answers. So please, we have students who are here with us from the, at least from my course, I know that several of them here are from the Fundamental of Agricultural Engineering, where we cover precision agriculture. And we have other colleagues who are really interested in precision agriculture. I think, yeah, I would like to open the floor for if anybody has a question or comment, please feel free. I think maybe I have a question that maybe is relevant to the topic of the theme of the of the mini series is about. We're talking here about especially large farmers who are really early adopter of the technology, of the precision agriculture, etc. From our perspective, is the question is how can we help small farmer, underserved farmers have access to this technology? and benefit from it, because it's, as you have seen, the trend there is really growing toward the use of this technology. So I think based on your experience, especially if you have strong experience working unlimited farm, limited resources and minority farms, can you please elaborate on this?
Sure, that's a great question. And I would just like to say that this technology, is applicable to any scale of farming. For example, we've seen widespread adoption of precision farming in China, where the size of farms is much smaller than the average size of farms in the United States. Now, the way that you actually help small farm holders use this technology is different in those circumstances. There has to be, more of a sort of regional approach towards supplying information that farmers can make decisions on, because individual farmers are less likely to be willing to purchase a lot of the technology that measures what's happening on their own fields. Although I will say that, the drones are not that expensive, the cameras are not that expensive. So I think even small farm holders, in many cases, can take advantage of these types of tools. And then I think there's a big role for the extension services and agribusiness in helping to develop the frameworks and the delivery tools and the cloud-based information systems that can be accessed by using a phone, for example. So every farmer has a phone, and where we're going, I think, is the development of these cloud-based services that can be accessed using phones.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate it. I think I'd like to encourage everyone to give us a question.
I wonder if anybody else has other experience, dealing with small farm holders and can add more insight to this issue.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much. Actually, I am from North Carolina A&T State University, and basically my work is mainly on sensor network and communication aspect. And I'm wondering, we are basically collaborating with the Ag department here at A&T to see what kind of like how we can use a sensor network and drones and the the robotics technology in the precision agriculture and also animal health monitoring application. My question here is, it sounds like the sensor networks has significant role in precision agriculture. So do you see the need to develop a new kind of sensor technology that could be applied in agricultural application, or is it mainly using the already like the produced sensors, but kind of more in a deployment scenario?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you, Tadilo.
You're very welcome.
Yes, I think sensor networks is the least developed part of precision agriculture. And there's a lot of value to having, in-field sensor networks to measure soil properties or to measure what's happening with the crop. So in future, I think we'll see a lot of developments in this arena with regards to things like small motes that can be spread throughout a field, and they can be attached to the leaves of crops, and they can monitor how fast, the crop height is increasing, or what kind of nutrients are in the leaf. There will be a lot of really interesting developments in this particular arena. Most of the previous contributions focused on monitoring soil moisture. So there's a lot of research on on soil moisture sensing networks. And these are generally, wireless based systems that report continuous data. And the many companies are providing these types of services also.
I see. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
That is very clear. Thank you.
Well, I see several colleagues from University of Arkansas, Pembroke, from Alcorn, from UC, from North Carolina A&T. Please help. Feel free to ask questions here, so to enrich the discussion. And I think maybe one point, Professor Molla, if based on your experience, you served as a panel chair of the Ag Engineering in NIFA, so for so many years. What are some of the opportunities maybe available for peer review and other 1890s in this area for potential funding? Because that's something that we can maybe benefit from your experience to give us some tips on that.
Yes, thank you, Ali. I did learn a lot about, needs in research by serving as panel manager for the Foundational Ag Engineering Program in NIFA. That's a program that funds about 4 or 5 projects, 5 to 6 projects maybe every year. And it's just one of many programs in NIFA. So I'd encourage people to look at the request for proposals for those NIFA calls, and then partner up with, people across your campuses, or partner up among yourselves and develop strong multidisciplinary teams that can address both the agronomics and the maybe engineering side. I think that's what would make a strong partnership. So if you have expertise in agronomics, but you also have expertise in, sensors or engineering of sensors or machine learning or artificial intelligence, there's a great need for those kinds of partnerships to do better, development of technology, both for crops and for animals.
Thank you. Any other question, please?
Dr. Muller, I want to thank you for such an exciting presentation. I've learned a lot about precision agriculture. However, given the situation that some of our very limited resource farmers may be in due to the pandemic, due to the serious wave of weather issues that we've dealt with, what would be the most pressing information that we could share, or any, as Dr. Ferris mentioned, resources to assist them in enhancing their productivity or their crops?
Well, I think, I always start by asking the farmers themselves, what are their biggest needs? Sorry. I think that's where everything has to start, is with the farmers. And and oftentimes they can tell you what is their biggest need, and then we can direct resources to those efforts. One of the strategies we've used is to develop, grower learning groups. And so the growers get together in small groups of 10 to 15, and they identify what their biggest needs are. And then the universities help them by offering to design demonstration experiments, like strip trials on their fields, for example, to compare different rates of seeding or different strategies for applying fertilizer. So you have, 3 or 4 replications in long strips of 2 or 3 different practices. And then at the end of the year, you measure the yield in each of those and you determine using the statistical analysis which practice is really the best. And so approaches like that have worked well for us in the past. I would also say that I think there's a real boom in the availability of satellite data, a lot of it for free. And so finding out how some of that could be used and developing, cloud-based decision support systems that could be accessed by phone. Again, those would be my 2 recommendations.
Excellent. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Dr. Kabroum.
Yeah. So are there crop species which are suitable for precision agriculture because of their plant architecture? For example, nitrogen deficiency is observed in older leaves at lower strata. So would it be difficult for the sensor to detect at early stage nitrogen deficiency and things like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Precision agriculture has been applied in, tens of different types of crops. So we have the major crops like corn, soybeans, wheat, small grains, cotton, sorghum, sugarcane, vegetable crops, grapes, orchard crops like apples, almonds, citrus. So the list of crops that are suitable for these techniques is quite large, and you can find applications for many of those crops. We tend to see more adoption of precision agriculture in crops that have high value. So it's a lot of times the high cash value crops are the ones where the adoption rates are higher, because it really pays more to do a good job of fine tuning the management.
Thank you.
Well, Professor Molla, I would just want to have a question since nobody else is giving us questions. So I think in the area of education, of teaching, you mentioned how you showed some new graphs, how adaptation of this technology is growing fast. While we are teaching our students, training these students for the future, I think that, I hope you agree with me that there is a need to introduce many of these concepts in our classes and our training so that we train them for the future jobs that they're going to involve many of these technology and maybe even more in the future.
Yes, I think that's true. Education is a key. And I might add that the demand for people who have technical expertise in precision agriculture is far greater than the number of students that are being trained. And just to give you an example, one of my former PhD students, when he graduated, he received multiple offers right away. And most of these offers are for more money than I make as a professor at the university. So, I mean, these are astonishing salaries, astonishing, honestly astonishing. And what companies are looking for is students who know agriculture and they know precision agriculture, or especially, artificial intelligence, statistics. And then, of course, they have to have good communication skills. So there's 3 things that, are really quite important. So yes, we need a curriculum that educates the workforce of the future. And that should be comprehensive. There should be, introductory courses. There should be more advanced courses. There should be courses in the agriculture. There should be courses in the computer science and engineering fields. There should be hybrid courses that combine both. There should be students learning about, here.
I have a question here in the chat. It says, does precision agriculture benefit food production and quality?
Oh, great question. Yeah, thank you, Kiara. Yes, precision agriculture improves the ability to produce food, because areas that have low yields because of crop stresses can be corrected in a timely fashion. So you can prevent yield losses due to nitrogen, due to water stress, or due to insects or weeds. It could also improve the quality of crops. So that could be, for example, the size of potato tubers, or the protein content of wheat, or the ripeness of apples or other fruits, or prevention of diseases in citrus. All of those would affect the quality as well.
I have another question that people have been asking is, can you share the slides of your presentation?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I can send those to you, Ali. You can then distribute them.
Thank you. And by the way, the presentation is recorded too. So that's, I should have said that earlier, but I forgot to say, so that we will make that available to those who are interested in seeing it again, because I think this is a good presentation that would like other to see if, again, to collect more information. I think we have couple of minutes. If anyone has a question at the end here before we conclude.
This is Dr. Kwanzaa from Tuskegee University. Dr. Mola, I want to thank you for a great presentation that you gave. My background is Ag and Biological Engineering from Purdue University as well. And I'm also into remote sensing, precision agriculture, do a lot of water quality and hydrologic modeling. I'm an associate professor here. I just wanted to ask if you are available for collaborations and, just basic calling you to talk about some of the research work going on and how, you could advise or collaborate, since you seem to have more experience in precision agriculture. And every now and then, I wish I knew someone who was doing exactly what you are doing, so that we could, I could reach out to.
Oh, thank you for offering to collaborate. I would be happy to do that. And, again, there's a lot of topics that are being considered for collaboration already. And we'd enjoy, talking with you and finding out more about your background and your interests. And yeah, I think.
So I'll send an email and reach out to you privately.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Dr. Kouachi. I appreciate it. And I think our time is there. Unless somebody else would like to ask a question, I would like to thank you.
One more question.
Yes, please.
Yeah, this is Pacino from North Carolina A&T State University. I'm just wondering, I really enjoyed this presentation, and I'm just wondering if any of your series of presentations will have anything to do with precision animal agriculture farming.
I think that's a great suggestion, and we will consider. Those are just the 4 we just start with, but we will extend the series, and I think we still have a few spots that we can include precision ag on animals. I think that's a good suggestion. Thank you for doing so, Doc. And we will reach out to someone who will give us a good presentation on that one. And by the way, I urge those of you who are interested maybe to participating, who are experts like our colleagues who just spoke a little before this, will be happy to include you, because we would like to benefit of this discussion. And I'm glad we do have this multi-institution discussion, because this is important, and we have lots of resources that we don't know about. We don't have experts like yourself and others around here that we really didn't have before opportunity to talk to. I think this is a great opportunity.
And Dr. Ali, if I may say, I was forwarded the information for this webinar. I wasn't on the original serve list, so I'm wondering if there's any way I can reach you or make sure you put my name on and my email on the correspondence.
Sure. I think what we did, we sent it to our associate executive directors of ARD and AI, and they distributed that. But we'll be happy to include you, and we will make sure that we continue this opportunity for discussion between our 1890 institution, because I think this is crucial.
Also, please include my name too.
Sure,
my
please.
email too. I'm going to type my address in the chat.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's working, right?
Anybody else? I mean, I think since we don't have lunch to serve, and I hate to cut you off, guys. If you still have questions or comments, this is I know for Tuskegee and for maybe North Carolina, lunch is already gone. I mean, it's 1 there.
It's actually 12 here.
I meant Tuskegee. I mean North Carolina.
North Carolina, yeah.
Okay. Well, Dean D'Souza, do you want to close out? If you have a few comments to make and thanking our speaker, we would like to appreciate if you can do that.
Yes, thank you very much, David. And I must add that you're not as old as what you made out to be with precision agriculture. It's only been around for 34 years. I did the math quickly, and so very, very recent. But seriously, a very good illustration of how precision ag can improve our lives, improve agriculture, and ultimately contribute to food security. And that is one of our signature initiatives here at Prairie View A&M University. I also want to thank our brothers and sisters from across the 1890 family for tuning in. And Ali, that was a great suggestion to reach out to them, because hopefully this will be a good segue to involve them in future presentations as well, since we've gone virtual. And once this COVID outbreak ends, David, welcome to come to campus and see for yourself some of the great things we have going on here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks, Ali. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean. And thank you, Dr. Mullah, for this wonderful presentation. And thank you, everybody, our brothers and sisters, the Dean mentioned across the 1890. We really appreciate it. And we would like to continue and take this opportunity to a better level. And you never know. I mean, we thought about COVID as a bad thing, but look what came out of it. It's something that we never thought about to happen before. I mean, we do have the technology, but we never tested it. And I think, there is always a good opportunity in any opportunity, even calamity sometimes have some opportunity for us to think about other things and do other things differently. So I hope that all you stay safe and healthy. Again, thank you, Professor Mullah, for this. And there is electronic clapping, but we will give you a round of applause. And please, you have the information about the next presentations. This is a weekly presentation. You can join us. The mini-series will continue. We'll expand it. But we will have other topics next week and the following. Every week we have a topic till December 3rd. So with that, have a great week. And thank you very much and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.